Call me Ishmael, because I have a whale of a tale for you. Hey blowholes, Trace here for D-News. In 1946, the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling, ICRW, started regulating how many whales could be caught, not to save them, but to keep the whaling industry alive and safe. In 1979, 39,000 whales were being killed every year. Save the Whales didn't hit popular vernacular until the early 1970s, cultivated by the public and conservation groups like Greenpeace, Sierra Club, World Wildlife Federation, and others. Then in 1986, the International Whaling Commission, set up by the ICRW in the 40s, decided that there should be a pause in commercial whaling on all whale species and populations, now known as the Commercial Whaling Moratorium. Whaling could still occur, but a special permit was needed for scientific whaling. Countries like Japan still famously kill hundreds of whales every year, 333 in 2016, including 200 pregnant females. Our friends at Seeker Stories were curious. Do Japanese whalers actually kill whales for science, or are they just crying science to support a tradition and black market food source? Check it out here.
Japan and whaling have a very long history and a very controversial present. Japanese whalers operate today in defiance of international law and in the face of wide condemnation. They do have a justification for their whaling, but it's shaky, it's based on a legal technicality, and it explains a lot about why the rest of the world is so angry at Japan. But let's start at the beginning. Whaling in some form has been a part of Japanese culture for thousands of years. Modern whaling began there around 1900 when a Japanese researcher named Juro Oka traveled to Europe to learn the tricks of the Western whaling trade. Oka brought that knowledge back to Japan, declaring in 1910, "I am firmly convinced that we shall become one of the greatest whaling nations in the world." And he was right. In the 1900s, Japan revolutionized its whaling, soon competing with the likes of Norway, the UK, and Germany. Business was good for everyone. In 1938, whalers around the world took home more than 45,000 whales from the Antarctic alone. Not surprisingly, overfishing also became a problem. So in the 1930s, Western powers like the US and UK began to regulate whaling. Japan largely ignored those efforts. Then World War II hit, Japan was humbled, and in 1951 it joined the new International Whaling Commission, a group of nations seeking once and for all to regulate whaling. Since the 1950s, a lot has happened in the whaling industry, but here's the gist. Notably, global support for commercial whaling has completely evaporated. In 1986, the International Whaling Commission put an indefinite moratorium on all whaling. Japan fought many of the new regulations, and according to the Sunday Times, even bribed other countries to vote with them on whaling issues. But in spite of all that, the international pressure worked. Commercial whaling is basically a thing of the past. Except for that one technicality. There's a small piece of international law that says, in essence, governments can allow whaling for scientific purposes. And Japan has used that law to justify nearly all their whaling since the 1980s. They argue that only lethal research can teach us certain things about whales. A lot of people disagree with this. But a quick gut check here. Most of what Japan scientifically hunts are minke whales. Minke whales are not endangered. Other countries like Norway and Iceland hunt them. Norway, in fact, never bothered with that research loophole at all. They just officially objected to the moratorium, and they've been happily hunting them ever since. And Japan just doesn't hunt that many whales. In recent years, the number is usually well under 1,000 per year. So truthfully, the issue here is not mass whale slaughter. It's more that Japan just doesn't seem honest about its intentions. Officials claim that science is the reason for the hunts, but in 2012, one Japanese official went on the record to say that the minke whale was hunted because it is said to have a very good flavor and aroma when eaten as sashimi and the like. In other words, scientifically, they're delicious. This all came to a head last year when the International Court of Justice basically called shenanigans on the whole operation. They argued that Japan's whaling could not reasonably be considered scientific, and they ordered Japan to cease its operations. Japan ignored that ruling, and this year plans to kill 333 minke whales, again, for science. which again has upset the rest of the world. And that is not likely to change. Just this month, the US and other nations penned a joint statement criticizing Japan. They wrote, "The science is clear. All information necessary for management and conservation of whales can be obtained through non-lethal methods." In other words, scientific whaling is a contradiction in terms.
There are a lot of things we can learn from whales. Their communication is incredible. Their poop feeds into the nutrient cycle of Earth's oceans. Their breath could help diagnose human diseases. And their ambergris, or whale vomit, is extremely valuable to humans in the perfume and cosmetics industry. Plus, of course, without humpback whales in the San Francisco Bay, the 24th century is going to be screwed until they travel back in time to grab a couple. What a great movie. Whales aren't the only giant animal that needs help thanks to human activity. Now conservationists are recruiting elephants and using them to help save the nearly extinct rhinoceros. Watch more on Seeker Stories here.
So translocation at this magnitude is a tremendous effort. We have seen a total of about 35 elephants and about 250 people.
Should we save the whales or should we let freedom ring and keep on whaling? Let us know down in the comments and make sure you subscribe for more D News and also subscribe to Seeker Stories.